The Milwaukee Brewers have made multiple moves as they have just announced their postseason roster for the NLDS with a few notable omissions. And plus, we're going to be breaking down these moves in specific that Pat Murphy has spoken about, given a reason behind a lot of these shocking moves, frankly. And we're going to be breaking it down, going over today's lineup as well, as we are just a few hours away from game time. Ladies and gentlemen, before we do jump into this video, though, I ask you one thing, and that's if you want to stay up to date with your Milwaukee Brewers news daily, we're going to have it right here on the channel. We're going to have another video after today's game, of course. This game, unreasonably early, let's not forget about that, but regardless, video now, video coming later after this game, and we're going to be breaking down all the moves right here in this video, so if you're looking forward to it, be sure to hit the sub button and stick around. But let's jump straight into this, as the roster has just been announced a few moments ago, and taking a look at this roster now, I'll pull it up with the big one for you guys so you can give it a read there. Going through the infield, there is not too much that we didn't suspect, kind of everything there. One notable omission was Rhys Hoskins. However, we have spoken out about that the last few days, going over the reason as to why Pat Murphy and this Brewers team has given him the NLDS off, I guess is a good way of putting it, because the whole situation that he's been in for the past little while has not really gotten into too many games. Having Andrew Vaughn come in here and be a phenomenal first baseman, he was really the odd man out on that infield. But going to the outfield, taking a look there, Brandon Lockridge making his, postseason over a guy like Rhys Hoskins due to the kind of the style of play that he brings to this Brewers team. And we're going to get a quote about that from Pat Murphy here in a few moments. We're going to get into that. The catchers, no notable changes, but the pitchers are where things get interesting, as a few names have been added and a few have been left off. And there's one big question that was surrounding why. And why was Grant Anderson put into this roster over a name like DL Hall, over a name like Tobias Myers? And that is really the major kind of confusion piece behind this move, the NLDS roster, and everything else is looking good. But when we go into it, that was a major question, because when we look at Tobias Myers' last 7 games, 15 games, and last 30 games, he has been exceptional. He's been very, very good. 7 games over the last few, 2.53 ERA. 8 hits, 3 earned runs, 7 strikeouts. Of course, he's a guy that brings not one specific, but a few specific things compared to what other players on this rotation, on this bullpen do bring. And we're going to jump into what Pat Murphy had to say about that idea and kind of the idea behind it. But Tobias Myers has been very, very good and only gotten better throughout this season. So having him not on this, of course, with the ability to start a game as well, if you were to head into a bullpen-style game, he is one guy that, it definitely sucks not to see on this, especially for a guy like Grant Anderson, who's really not been great as of late over his kind of last few games with the Brewers. But going into Tobias Myers' stats as well, taking a look at his regular season, 3.55 ERA, 38 strikeouts. He's been good, and career postseason 1 starting game, 5 innings pitched, 5 strikeouts, of course. But at the end of the day, that's not really what we're getting or what we look for Tobias Myers in for the postseason. But going into it, Adam McCalvy said the decision came down to the bullpen, as they always do. Grant Anderson gets the nod to face righties at the bottom of the Cubs' order over Tobias Myers or another lefty like Robert Zastrinsky or DL Hall. So seeing kind of the idea behind this, it makes a little bit more sense now when you're taking a look at the Cubs lineup. And that's something I've mentioned, is that this roster that would be decided today, and of course is decided now, like you just saw, was really dependent on whether or not they played the Padres or the Cubs. And they would go and kind of use their matchups that way in a much smarter decision. So although Grant Anderson may not be as good as what we've seen Tobias Myers, DL Hall, or really anybody else that was a mission from this bullpen, the matchups are a much more important thing that this Brewers team is looking at, and going up against a Cubs team that has quite a few righties at the bottom, they're going to be much more important to have Grant Anderson there over a guy like DL Hall in this case, just say the lefty who's been very, very good this season as well, coming off the IR. But as for Robert Gasser making the cut, there are many possibilities, including a start for him, is what Adam McCalvy had to say. And going into that as well, taking a look at the roster that we've seen, seeing what the rotation we've had, there is a very good option for Robert Gasser to start. Of course, it's something I mentioned where we did know that it's going to be Freddy Peralta, Quinn Priester, and after that, whether it be bullpen or Robert Gasser or someone like that, it was still yet to be determined. But we've known from Pat Murphy, from this Brewers team, that all hands will be on deck when it comes to this postseason after Game 1. So we can assume that Freddy Peralta will be in the bullpen for pretty much any game that he is not starting. And going into a very integral, piece of this team, his kind of utilization will be something that is going to be a very big note of this Brewers NLDS and, presuming an NLCS and World Series as well. But as for Rhys Hoskins, Pat Murphy said that it was a very tough decision to keep him off the roster, but the speed of Brandon Lockridge tilted things in his favor. And this is something I believe I mentioned it was either last video or the video before. Be sure to go check those out as well, because they've kind of all put this kind of, news that we're getting today into perspective, but a deeper dive into those as well. But having a guy like Brandon Lockridge, who they did, of course, get earlier on in this season, having him on the base pads in the field is a much better decision than Rhys Hoskins. And although Rhys Hoskins has that power that a lot of this Brewers team does not have, putting Brandon Lockridge in this team on a pinch run in the field when you're up by 1 run in the 9th, something like that is so much more important than having Rhys Hoskins when you know that this team has the ability to have players come out here, get a home run, get an extra base hit, be able to put bat on ball and get the result that we're looking for. So at the end of the day, I think having this at this point right now is much more important. Whether that or not that changes coming towards the NLCS, I doubt it, but it still is a very kind of interesting option to take a look at and see how things will kind of transition into what the roster may expand like in a later part of this postseason, especially with names like Brandon Woodruff being left off due to injury and how things will play out on that side of things. Now, going and taking a look at today's lineup, and of course, as I mentioned, this game is only a few hours away at this point, and I do apologize for a little bit late. Wanted to get everything, and as I mentioned, the schedule wasn't really in the Brewers' favor with getting the early game, but Jackson Chourio, Bryce Turang, William Contreras, Christian Yelich, Andrew Vaughn, Sal Frelick, Caleb Durbin, Blake Perkins, Joey Ortiz, and Freddy Peralta on the mound. This game starting out 1:08 CST. So this game, only a few hours away now, is going to be a very interesting kind of decision to see how things do play out. And I mean, going into this Cubs series, we know them very well. We know their plan. We know how they play. And I think that's something that this team has been studying all of the wild card as well. I think that they're coming in ready to go against whether it was the Padres or the Cubs. And going into this series against their pitchers, we saw quite a few, and they used quite a few against the Padres. So they're not keeping much under wraps or not keeping much hidden heading into this series, especially when you're taking a look at how this Brewers team can go about playing against any pitcher. We saw, I'm just going to use Paul Skeens as an example. We saw this Brewers team beat up on him a couple different times. And yes, it's a different atmosphere in the postseason. But if you do that to Paul Skeens, you could do that to anybody. So going into it, a very good lineup right now that I'm liking. I'm liking not just the order that they're in, but also kind of the scheme that this team is going about. Now, one thing as well before we do finish the video off is Pat Murphy had this to say about Cubs Game 1 starter Matthew Boyd heading into today's game. It was a guy we were very interested in before we signed with Cleveland in June 2024, so we know a lot about him. And now, that's a very interesting thing. Whether or not this is mind games, I'm sure it's a little bit of it from Pat Murphy, but we also know that this team was interested in quite a few different people back then. But going into now, this upcoming season, they've had him, keep on, tabs on him all season. Going back to when they actually knew him, they know his in-depth stuff. So, of course, that's going to change. You're not going to be kind of tipping anything in a postseason game, but the Brewers know him. Pat Murphy know him very well, and now the fact that this team is going up with what they know Matt Boyd does, it's going to be interesting to see how they kind of adjust to this here in Game 1, of course, with lots of other options that this Brewers team does have. I fully believe in this Brewers team. So, Game 1 is only a few hours away. Like I said, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to have a video after as well for you guys, keeping you up to date with everything going on with this Brewers team here. But right now, that's all I got. So I'll be talking to you guys after Game 1, but we have a big win to get first. And like I said, we're going to be breaking it all down. So I'll see you then, but let's go Brewers. Thank you for watching. Hope you have a great day. See you later.